Just weeks before the Lok Sabha elections, the Bharatiya Janata Party-led central government notified the rules of the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, 4 years later on March 11th.
हमने कहा था हम CAA लाएंगे.
This also means that the third promise of their manifesto is implemented. Now, Citizenship Amendment Act grants citizenship to Hindus, Jains, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists and Parsis who came to India on the grounds of religious persecution on or before 31st December 2014 from Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan. In 2019, there were widespread protests across the country against CAA. People feared that this law is anti-Muslim and might take away their citizenship. Critics have also questioned the change in the secular nature of our country if citizenship is granted based on religion. There are over 200 petitions filed in the Supreme Court in this matter, and the court is scheduled to hear it on March 19th. But is the law really anti-Muslim? What are the legal basis of CAA? Can this law stand in the Supreme Court? To answer these questions, we have with us R. Samprati Gaura, who is a legal counsel.
So thank you so much for doing this with us firstly. And now we want to understand the legal aspects of CAA and why is it so controversial. So the obvious question is that the critics fear that this is the CAA is targeted at taking away the citizenship of the people. Is it really true?
See, when you look at CAA as, let's say, a tool or a law in isolation, right? That in itself does not affect the citizenship of Indian minority Muslims, people who have already have established, lineage. For example, as cliche as it goes, like this would not affect our Shah Rukh Khan or people who already have the citizenship granted. But the fear per se, I would say, is not unwarranted also, because the CAA, when clubbed with other aspects such as your NRC exercises that are going to take place right now, they're happening in Assam, and the Home Minister has said that it's going to be a countrywide exercise. These things sort of warrant a certain level of anxiety amongst the minorities. But to answer that question in a crux, right, it does not take away. CAA as a tool does not take away. Nothing in the language of the law equips the government to take away an already granted citizenship for Indians, because this law per se does not deal with Indian citizens, right? It only caters to the migrant population or the refugee population specifically, who are migrated from 3 specific countries. That is your Afghanistan, your Bangladesh, and your Pakistan. So it doesn't affect all Indian minority Muslims already residing in the country.
So just to summarize it, it's not going to affect the Indian citizens, specifically Muslims, but if combined with NRC, that's when the fear comes around, and that's when critics point out that it may take away the citizenship. But CAA in itself might not do that.
Yeah, definitely not. See, the certain objectives of a law, right? When looked at CAA in isolation, it is a very forward-looking law, because prior to this Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, there were only acts that cater to identification and deportation of illegal migrants. Like I think you had your Foreigners Act of 1946, and then your Passport Act. No specific act catered to the minorities of the neighboring states. That is like the partition India that existed. You had your countries such as same Pakistan, and you had your Bangladesh. So so these minorities were left in a lurk, right? Because these countries were they were not secular in nature. If you take the example of Pakistan, it vociferously declared that non-Muslims would not be given citizenship. So in that aspect, the minorities there were always second-class citizens. And the only option they had was to sort of, migrate towards India. And even when they did, the waiting period as such was pretty lengthy. It was almost close to, let's say, 14 to 11 years. Right now, this act has kind of reduced it to 5 years. Like for people who have migrated before December 31st of, I think, 2014.
2014,
Yeah.
So when we say that people who have migrated, so now the ones, of course, who've migrated legally, they can apply for citizenship. That's very clear. But does the law open the migrants who have entered India illegally? Now, will it grant citizenship to them as well?
See, this is where there's a sort of a law has to be looked at in the practical perspective, right? For example, there's obviously legal migration that happens, but most of the migrants that come, especially your refugee class migrants, they enter the country illegally itself. Like the borders are porous. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Yes.
Yeah, the borders is extremely porous. The borders are extremely porous, right? So in under this scenario, what happens is, I'll take the example of where exactly this distinction based on religion is applicable, and why there is a debate about why this is sort of perceived as anti-Muslim in nature. It's because suppose there's an example of, let's say, a Kiran and an Akhtar, both of whom migrated from Pakistan, right? And they followed the same procedure, whether they legally migrated or whether they illegally migrated. But if they migrated before the 31st of 2019, 2014 December, one of them would be entitled automatically for grant of citizenship, while the other would not, even though both of them would have done the same mistake. So here is where the entire debate comes as to why should one be meted out with a different sort of treatment just on the basis of religion. So this debate in its entirety falls under like two classifications, right? One is the secular nature of India being under threat. Second is, does Article 14 grant sort of protection for these illegal migrants also? And you see a lot of debate on social media saying no, they're not citizens, they're illegal migrants. But that's not the case. Your Article 14 is applicable irrespective of your citizenship. So any person who's residing within the territory should not be meted with a different sort of treatment. So that in itself invalidates
Article 14, the presence in India allows you to have that right. So whether
it has equality before law and equal treatment before law. So that in itself is supposed to have enough, to protect the migrants. But somehow this law is not in sync with that particular concept of the constitution.
Right, makes sense. And also you pointed out that the problem, the debate is because it's considered as anti-secularism. It doesn't come into that contagion. So is it until now, we did not see that citizenship was granted based on religion. Like religion never became a basis for our country, at least. And CA does that because it has specific religions there. Is it allowed? Because now the Supreme Court is going to hear it finally. March 19th has been the date. As per the law, can religion be one of the basis for citizenship?
See, religion, the way this act can be perceived, right? You need to look at the objective of a particular law. Even when the Supreme Court tomorrow goes about and it invalidates or strikes down any law, it looks into many criteria. The major of which would be whether the law is arbitrary in nature. Does it have a logical object and reasoning behind this? The majority government, that is the Narendra Modi led NDA government, they are taking the recourse or the reasoning that there is something known as this law is in terms of the entire purpose behind enacting this law was to the protection of minorities. And this is where it's been very cleverly drafted, in which they have conspicuously left out two major countries, that is Myanmar and Sri Lanka, both of whom have minorities, right? And I'll get to you as to why that particular differentiation or exclusion was done. So the government of the day takes the argument that you have Pakistan, you have Bangladesh, which is a Muslim majority country in itself. So Muslims will not qualify as minorities or subjugated class. But obviously records show to the contrary, wherein you have your Ahmadian Muslims or Shia Muslims in Pakistan, where there is extremely second-grade citizen treatment being meted out to them. And also forget that, let me give a very clear example which everybody would understand per se, right? Suppose you have your Afghanistan, which is included in this particular law. Women are not safe under the Taliban rule, right? So if a woman tomorrow goes about to talk against the Taliban, and there is a bounty on her head, and she decides to migrate to India, she will not be given automatic citizenship here, right? And how can you in any way say that women in Taliban ruled Afghanistan are
Uh-huh.
not minorities. They are the worst form of minorities that can ever exist. So
Yes.
that is where the object and resolution does not kind of sync with this particular law. And as far as the challenge, since you brought it up, the challenge to this law,
Uh-huh.
see, you majorly see this challenge in like non-NDA led governments, that is the state government.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have your Mamata Banerjee, you
West
have your
Bengal,
Stalin-led
Kerala.
DMK
Yeah.
and Kerala. These are things. So let us look into whether they're giving, leaders are coming out and giving statements saying that we will not implement it.
Uh,
See, when you give a statement per se, right, you need to have some amount of backing towards whether you can do it or you cannot do it, right?
uh,
Because leaders come and say anything in the spur of the moment. But when you like legally analyze it, they have no other option. The only option left is for them to have approached the Supreme Court under 131 center state
and that they
disputes,
have
which is
done
what
already.
that
Yeah.
they've already done. But in isolation, pending the the verdict, or let's say even if the Supreme Court does not hold it in favor of the states, can states still go forward and not abide by or
Yeah.
adhere to this law? They absolutely cannot, because see, when it comes to legislative powers, right, it is clearly mentioned in, I think, entry 17 of the seventh schedule, as well as the article 11 of the constitution, which talks about citizenship, that the union government, the central
Yeah.
government, is the sole executing and implementing authority when it comes to law regarding your
Central.
citizenship. And further, you have your article 246, which clearly differentiates between the legislative powers of what a state can do and what a center can do. This particular article, when read with 256 and 257 of the Constitution, not only debars the state from not following the particular central
Central law.
legislation, but it also casts an inherent obligation for them to ensure that the state government does not use anything in their executive authority to stop the implementation or impede the implementation of a central law. So again, to answer in a crux, state governments cannot tomorrow bring out a notification saying that we will not
Yeah, what
implement this, because that's null and void. It's ultra vires. They do not have the authority to do the same. The only recourse right now is
it's
knocking on the
Supreme
steps
Court.
of the Supreme Court, which is
And
where the pending litigation is.
so there are a few things. Now, in the when you were talking, you also mentioned and you clearly pointed out that Afghanistan and there are Muslim minorities over there where they are discriminated, but the law doesn't take that into consideration. So why is that firstly? And also the critics have again pointed out that it leaves Sri Lankan Tamils, it leaves Rohingyas, which are again coming under religious persecution. So why is that happening? Like, will it hold again in the Supreme Court, do you think?
See, the Supreme Court cannot dictate to the government of the day as to why are you leaving certain countries. So tomorrow, even Maldives might come under that. Tomorrow, any sort of country might come under this, right? So it is completely the prerogative of the executive authority to add or subtract countries as in how they wish, because it's a completely executive, legislative making power. So tomorrow, if we want to, closed complete all sorts of trade and diplomatic relations with Pakistan, you cannot like go say this is very anti-Muslim in nature. No, because the government of the day is equipped with that part of that sort of power under the constitution. So the Supreme Court per se would not go into the legalities or the reasoning behind why is Sri Lanka and Myanmar left out. The government can very well say that we cannot take the load of Muslims, or let's say Rohingya Muslims who are lakhs in number, as well as the Tamil Elam brothers who are there in like who are like it's clear that they migrated from Tamil at some point, Tamil Nadu at some point. So, at around this time, the government, this is where a clever sort of drafting of this law has been done, wherein you cannot stand and, with a straight face say that Rohingya is not a minority subjugated class, right? Because like, if at all you take in the present context, you have the citizens of Gaza, as well as then you have Rohingyas. Like these are the most massacred sort of minority class that is existing. Now what has happened with the Rohingya Muslims is that they cannot go back to Myanmar. It has become a failed state of sort, because there's already a junta versus the army war happening, both of whom do not want the Rohingyas in the picture. Then they have migrated to Bangladesh. So here, if the government opens, let's say, okay, from Bangladesh we'll take in Muslim minorities, the Rohingyas would automatically classify under this, because there are already refugees existing in Bangladesh, right? So, and when they come in hordes of number, our country is not equipped to handle that.
Right.
And there is already sort of resentment happening in the Northeast plus Bengal belt, wherein, these people do not want them to come and, destroy the homogeneity of their culture.
Right.
So, basis this, there, I think the government is equipped to make that classification of which country they should have, which country they shouldn't have. Where the legal question lies is that why was there an exclusive, exclusion of the religion of Islam?
Yes. Also, because the law says that religious persecution, but as far as to my knowledge, the law does not define what is religious persecution. Like, that's not clearly defined in CA. Is that right? And then what would consist of religious persecution if it's so open right now?
See, that is another question up for debate, wherein a lot of what this law enacts, as well as your laws read in coherence with your National Registry of Citizens and your Foreigners Tribunal, it is vague, 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 and vague. That is the only clear thing about these laws are that it is very vague, and it gives a lot of powers to the executive authorities to decide what is right and what is not right. Because in the lack of a clear-cut definition, right, it is left to the sole prerogative of the officers sitting there in these tribunals, let's say foreigners tribunals, deciding the citizenship of under National Registry of Citizens, for them to decide. And like slightly deviating from the question that you asked, but very relevant to discuss here, is you look at the entire functioning of the National Registry of Citizens that is in place in
only in
Assam.
Assam.
So yeah, only in Assam, but right now there is a sort of debate that it needs to be, I mean, that it would be spread across the country. Like the minister, the Home Minister has given
announced it.
Yeah, he has announced it. So in this scenario, what happens is you have the Foreigners Tribunal, which, like, you asked me question of like, okay, what constitutes as a persecuted section of society? Persecution religious sect. That is at least fair enough. To an extent, you might be able to like show with evidence, okay, these riots happened, these communal riots happened. But reasons as don't mind me for saying this, as lame as your initial being in the last of your name instead of the first of your name, or let's say one spelling error, like citizenship is being denied under Foreigners Tribunal. And the people who sit in this Foreigners Tribunal, right, are people who have like absolutely rich knowledge of immigration law as well as human rights law. The criteria itself is that you need to have a sort of understanding about the foreign infiltration issue in from Assam to also from Bangladesh to Assam, and you need to know the local dialect of Assamese. So
it's
this is and the
very
so that's for someone who's been accorded with so much power to decide the fate of a person and leave him stateless. Because right now what happens is Bangladesh has clearly told the Prime Minister, when she visited, she's made it very evident that people, like almost 19 lakh people, when they conducted the exercise NRC, they were excluded from the citizens. She told, we will not take these people. We already have the burden of Rohingyas attached with us. We are not a country meted out. They have chosen to migrate long back. We will not take them back. So, and obviously here is where, the Home Minister again sort of gives an assurance that we will not give them back, but they're kept in these deportation cells, right?
Centers, yes.
Yeah, but for how long? Like, for example, there have been instances in which, let's say for dacoity, robbery, manslaughter, you have like people staying for 5 or 6 years. And these people, illegal immigrants also, they're again made to like meet out with the same, like, it looks as indefinite void of like, when will I be released?
No, wait, where they are going and how are we? Where will we send them if the country says that we are not taking them back?
This is the biggest problem when it comes to, let's say, being categorized as stateless, right? Because the state from which you came in does not want you at all. The state in which you're here is not according you any sort of citizenship, and lack of citizenship, kind of let's say denies you certain basic rights. Like, for example, no government scheme would cover you at all. And these are people who are like under the BPL category. They need this sort of government cushioning to survive. They don't have any economic
resources for food,
not at all,
because you can't apply until and unless you don't have the basic identity resources with you.
Exactly.
So this burden now comes to the government to take care of them, because privately you can't do anything. Government has to help you to survive in the country.
There are talks in Assam itself of, let's say, privatizing the detention centers because the government cannot handle it. And obviously, privatization leads with like profit maximization. So they will obviously deny certain things.
Yeah.
So the hodgepodge nature in which the foreigners tribunal is conducting itself in Assam is clear evidence that, either give it to a proper judicial authority, let's say the high courts or any court equivalent, or let's say do not, try to poke your finger into something that you cannot handle, which is what the government is doing right now. See, the government cannot please everybody in an instance, right? So this law was basically put forward because it was not the first time that this law came about. In 2016, the government tried to bring it about, but the 16th Lok Sabha dissolved. And in 2019, the law has already been enacted. It's just that the implementation rules were pending, which I think in March 11th, the government has notified. So here, one major thing that we need to take into consideration is that there are conflicting interests that the government has to ensure, right? Forget the entire the entire Muslim debate. There is people of Assam who itself are in opposition of CAA, and as the citizenry or the society of Assam is taking it a step notch higher in terms where they're saying that listen, we have had lakhs of migration happening from Bangladesh over the years, right? Since especially when that Bangladesh Pakistan war happened in, I think, in 1975. Yeah. Yeah, so that's where you had minorities as well as Hindu, Muslims. It didn't matter which religion; they just wanted to flee Bangladesh because there was the Pakistan military was all over massacring people. So around this time, what happened is that Assamese people are we have a very unique culture, we have a very unique language. It is being deteriorating, taken away by this particular thing. So huge protests happened, right? I think an Assam Accord of sorts was kind of signed between your central government and I think the Students Union of Assam, I guess. Assam Students Union.
They're still against
they're still against it because they say that, okay, tomorrow, when they conducted the NRC, 19 lakh plus people, both Hindus as well as Muslims, were left out.
Just to add it, in Assam, the problem is not with religion, but it's more to do with insiders and outsiders.
Outsiders,
don't care
exactly.
about religion. So just for our viewers, that has to be mentioned that in Assam, CA and NRC is very different when compared to
the debate. The debate there does not revolve around why is a certain religious class being excluded. They are we do not want more migrant population coming. They don't have the resources, right? It's not a state that is doing extremely well. They have to fend for their own citizenry in the first thing. When you look at it from a holistic perspective, it sort of makes sense for them because they cannot handle these sort of migration happening. And going back to what I was saying, almost 19 lakh people were left out, which includes both Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, Christians, everybody, right? But here, all the religious sect except your people belonging from the Muslim religion can take recourse to your CAA and they can easily have a safe haven, which is what the Assam Students Union as well as the Assam population is having a problem with. They're saying then what was the point of the Assam Accord if CAA indirectly invalidates that particular thing? So that is another thing that the government has to take into consideration right now while looking into how to handle this entire scenario in the upcoming days.
Also, one more thing, since we spoke about the cases in Supreme Court, these cases have been filed in 2019 and the Supreme Court has yet to hear it. So can the central government frame rules when the court is yet to hear the case? Is it legally?
Yeah, definitely. Right. See, the thing is, people have this wrong presumption that the minute a case is filed in the court, the law becomes inoperative. That is not the same. Until and unless the court gives an immediate stay order saying that stay this particular implementation until the pendency of this particular suit, then the government has to stay the implementation. So and in case so there has been no stay. It's still in the hearing stage as far as I recall, and or the government, the Supreme Court, has to come up with a clear cut judgment saying that this law is ultra vires the constitution and the implementation of the same cannot go ahead. And in that scenario, then the union government has to look into other alternatives of how to circumvent, because I'm pretty sure that the NDA government is very adamant about bringing this law into implementation.
So now talking about this, if we, for a while, leave aside the religious aspect of it, Like how we have already spoken that in Assam, the problem is about the culture, the homogeneity of the state, and people are against it because they believe that it will take away their culture. There are no resources. For a for hypothesis, let's say that the law is actually implemented, and we are granting citizenship based on religious persecution. Now what will happen after that? What will happen to the citizens? How is it going to affect us Indian citizens who are already there? Because there will be a number of people coming in, they are going to get grant citizenship, and when they are being granted, of course there comes a lot of benefits to vote, to be applicable for the government schemes. They get jobs in education spaces, you are allowed to take in. What would that mean for the citizens now? Because we are a huge population.
See, see, to answer that question, right? Let's juxtapose our current standing as a country. Yeah, we're doing good, but we're not doing the best in terms of, let's say, your social and human development indicators
Yeah,
for education, health, and research. Look at a very forward looking, or let's say already there in terms of the economic pie, sort of governments like the European Union per se. They itself are not able to handle the hordes of
migrant.
migrants
Yeah.
who are fleeing Syria, who are fleeing all
Mhm.
sorts. And again, they were very hypocritical in only letting in people from Ukraine, but not
Yes.
other
Yeah.
persecuted regions in Middle East. So they themselves are not able to handle it. The question of immigration per se, right? Everybody wants, if at all they do allow immigration, they either want cheap labor
Yeah.
or they want like extremely good, like doctors, like for whom US is all
Yeah.
open for.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a heaven for, like they
Hmm.
welcome you with open arms. But
White collar
nobody
jobs
wants,
there.
yeah, white collar jobs of sort, and nobody wants this sort of oppressed class wherein they don't come with enough resources. You have to provide for them, wherein you have already a 1.5 billion population, most of whom are dependent on government sort of subsidies, government
Yes.
backing, and government cushioning to like go forward with their lives. And here is where it's sort of like people sitting in urban metropolitans like Mumbai, Bangalore, we will be like, how does anybody else coming in
Yes.
matter? But it does matter to the local economy of Assam, right? Because just to like break it down in terms of economic perspective, suppose let's say the laborers who were born and brought up in Assam used to charge, let's say, 500 or 1,000 rupees for a coolie per day, right? And now with the migrant population coming in, the rate of wage laborers will automatically go down. These people will be
Because they
ready
will
to
go.
work for 100 rupees.
Yeah.
So that is where there's a sort of a distortion in this market that is going to happen, which we will not be able to see right from our posh metropolitan places. But there, where there is already dearth of employment opportunities, and the government has to do each and everything for the citizens, taking on more than what you can
Yeah.
fend for. I think that is the debate that that's revolving around Assam as per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah, because in Assam we have CA and NRC, it has been implemented at least. But in throughout, and they are facing this problem of resources and the other things. But if it's implemented in India where it's so huge, our population is so huge throughout the country. Again, like one thing is that firstly, do we have the resources to cater to more immigrants at this point of time?
See, it's in terms of, to answer that question, right? The government somewhere sees that it is the custodian of the minorities, barring people from Islam, to take care of them. If it was not, then it wouldn't have implemented the CA in the first place,
Mhm.
right? The government wants to be a safe shelter for the persecuted Hindus, persecuted Parsis in, like, let's say, the
Mhm.
countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh of sorts. But here another government, and this is where the argument of the current government stands, right? That these numbers, when in compared to the Muslim so, religious
Minorities,
people,
yeah.
who, yeah, minorities who would come in if the CAA includes Islam as a religion, then what happens is that more number of people come, right? Like you hardly have like few people in terms of the Parsi community or the Christian community living in your Pakistan and Afghanistan. Like either they have migrated towards the west or they have so long back come back to India. And this sort of minor migration the government is entitled sorry, equipped to handle. But when it comes to Rohingyas, who are lakhs in number, right, as well as their argument against the Tamil aliens, who are again like the entirety of North Sri Lanka per se. So when this class of people come in, the government is like, either we don't have the resources to fend for them, or if they come in, the local populace wherever they reside, a lot of cultural and sort of traditional tensions will subside, which is the truth. Like for example, if you have Rohingyas coming in, they will obviously settle in your parts of West Bengal and Assam, right, through Bangladesh, which is the easier option for them.
Because the
And the
borders are
situation there
connected.
is, yeah, the situation there is already very tense. So basis that is against a sort of a security sort of problem that the government is facing. One of the reasoning behind why these countries were being excluded per se.
And there's one more thing. Let's say if uh, you know the citizenship is granted to the people mentioned in CA, they come in. Now, how is it going to be divided? Because the most easy way is that the states that are close to the border, they will see the most migrants. Very basic, very logical. But again, in those spaces, it's not that it would be the ownership of state now to handle these extra people coming in. And there will be cities like, let's say, metropolitan cities like Bangalore, Mumbai. We might not directly see the people coming in the first places. How is the allocation going to happen? Because then there will be a lot of imbalance within the states.
See, that sort of falls under the executive priority of the central government, wherein once you come in, it has to see what sort of, let's say, rehabilitation programs the government has in mind, for making sure that the people who migrated, the Sikhs religion that they mentioned, those people who migrated, how do they go about their particular lives here? So yes, the immediate, let's say, repercussion would be felt by the border states, like, yeah, especially the northeast, your Assam, your Bangladesh, sorry, your West Bengal, as well as, let's say, and when people come from Pakistan or Afghanistan, I don't think per se they would be just surrounding in the borders of Punjab or Rajasthan. People, once you can get the grant of a citizenship, right, these people will inevitably, in the long run, will inevitably migrate to better job opportunities, which it is undisputed exists in metropolitan cities. So either they go to Delhi, Bombay, Hyderabad, Chennai, or Bangalore. So these are the cities where wherein you already see people like being migrated to these cities for better employment opportunities. So I think that is what even the class of people who will be granted citizenship will be doing. And there is no, once you're granted citizenship, the government, like what is happening with the people who have been excluded in the NRC, they've been detained, their movement has been like restricted, either like in a particular compound or in the particular police station local limits. But that is not the case for like people being granted citizenship under CAA. All throughout the territory of India, you're free to go, you're free to explore the opportunities that this vibrant country has to offer for you. But then again, certain classes of people are not being meted out with this particular freedom.
Also, lastly, will this give a benefit to BJP in the Lok Sabha polls now? Because the timing is so crucial.
See, a lot of people ask questions, right? Like, for example, what was the need to immediately bring this up? Like when the polls are just, 6 or 5 months away. One, obviously, you have your the election dates have not yet been notified, so
What
no
happened
particular
today,
law
though? Yeah.
yeah. Like, so when at that point, I think somewhere you cannot talk about it in terms of, okay, what is the electoral vote, positivities that the BJP will reap. It is in terms of they promised something and they came to power in the first NDA term, and they were not able to implement that because obviously by the time they did, the Lok Sabha dissolved. And in the second particular point, when they did try to bring this up in 2019, the country was plagued with a number of other problems. You had your COVID onslaught, and
And there
then
was
the
fairly high
economy took a
protest
dive.
throughout the country
Yeah, there was a
during that
fairly
time.
high protest back then also, right? And like somewhere, it's not that the government has very cleverly timed this implementation right now. I wouldn't say that per se, because without any sort of evidence, that would be a very false assertion to make, because it was in 2019 that they wanted to implement this, but because of XYZ reasons way
After
beyond the control
4 years,
of the
now they
government,
are doing.
yeah, now they want to, because they, again, I think somewhere the BJP does not want to let their vote base think that we failed once in 2016, we're going to like fail again in 2019, give us another mandate. Yeah, they don't want that. They want to make sure that we promise something, we're going to implement it. And as far as the track record of the current government goes, it is in terms of best in terms of implementing the laws that they have enacted, right? Because all sorts of government, be it UPA, be it Janata Dal, whichever came to power previously, they've bought certain laws, and when the people sort of protested, they took it back. But in the entire track record of the NDA government, I think barring two laws, one was the agriculture
Farmer
bill
ones,
that
yes.
came about, farmers protest, and the second was the recent motor vehicles bill because of the truck drivers association protest. Only these two things were stayed, right? Apart from that, they have not taken back any law because they are clear cut in their manifesto as to what they want, what they will bring about if they are brought into power. And I think for the people who voted them to power, they're doing justice
Yeah,
in
they
terms
said
of bringing
4
about this law.
main things in 2019: Ram Mandir and Article 370, and CA was one thing, and UCC is there, but it's still in talks. It has not happened. But two things
Yeah,
they
it's
did
still in
promise
talks,
what was there
but
in their
yeah,
manifesto.
yes.
So
See,
to keep
UCC
that
somewhere
promise.
again. Yeah. So you see all these state level governments which are ruled by the BJP, they're already bringing about UCC. Yeah, so somewhere it's about more about implementing what you promised so that you can face the voters, with better confidence in the upcoming poll rallies.
Thank you so much. I think you did help us understand a lot of things about CA in simple words. So thank you for doing this with us.
Thank you for having me. It was like a pleasure talking about this.